Hello everybody, it is nysclips and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be analyzing every major Shameless relationship. At least in my opinion, these are all of the relationships in the show that I consider major. Other than the Gallagher family dynamic itself, the romantic relationships were one of the most intriguing aspects of the show because it was really interesting to see how Frank and Monica's relationship influenced their children and how they interact and connect with their respective people in their lives. So here we have Fiona, Lip, and Ian, and a few of their love interests that I think affected them the most. As the three oldest siblings, they had the most complex relationships. So we're going to be diving into each and every single one of these, going through the nature of the relationship, what made them toxic, what made them healthy, if anything made any of these relationships healthy. And then we're going to come back full circle at the end to talk about Frank and Monica. And then we also have to talk about Kevin V as well, because how could we not in a video about shameless relationships? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Fiona. Up first for Fiona, we have none other than Jimmy Steve. Fiona and Jimmy met in the very first episode during a night out at a club. After Fiona and V meet Jimmy, they invite him back to the neighborhood where he makes a great impression. He's telling stories, introducing himself as Steve, even though later on we find out that is not his real name. At first, the relationship is purely sexual. The night they meet, they bang it out on the kitchen floor, but they are interrupted by police who walk in to bring in a very drunk Frank. Jimmy Steve is like, "Oh, who is that?" And Fiona's like, "It's my dad. This is the normal routine. Time for you to go." So after that, Fiona thinks it's done. She hit it and quit it. However, Jimmy Steve is actually really drawn to Fiona. He is drawn to that messy, chaotic energy. And here I'm going to insert a scene that the actor who plays Jimmy talked about, how he was so attracted to the Gallaghers, because I feel like he worded it so perfectly.
The Gallaghers use each other. It's community. It's wild. It's raw. It's all over the place. It's messy, and it's alive. Whereas Steve didn't come from that, but when he sees that, he craves that.
So yeah, after their one night stand, Jimmy Steve likes Fiona and frequently returns to the Gallagher house, so she agrees to go out on a dinner date with him. But during this dinner date, Fiona starts to think that Jimmy is just some snooty, boring businessman type guy, and this isn't gonna work with Fiona because, you know, she's a Gallagher, she's Southside. And by the way, they use this phrase as an excuse too much throughout the show, to a level where it's almost cringe. Like, one of them will literally punch an old woman in the face and Fiona will just go, "Oh, it's okay, we're Gallaghers, we're Southside." And I'm like, that doesn't make it right. Anyways, Fiona and Jimmy Steve are on this dinner date and she is about to walk out of the date, but Jimmy Steve then pulls up in a stolen car. So it looks like he has a little bit of Southside in him too. He steals and sells cars for a living. So upon finding this out, Fiona regains interest. She hops into the car with him. They go on a joyride and begin their relationship. And just a side note before I get into the analysis, there is a scene in season 6 or 7 where Mickey gets out of jail and wants to reconnect with Ian, and Fiona is just like, "No, Ian, don't get back together with Mickey. Your life has been going so well," and Mickey would just set a match to it. And I'm like, girl, you have some nerve lecturing Ian on chasing chaotic men. You literally hopped into a stolen car with this guy. But anyways, a lot of the Shameless fandom thinks that Jimmy Steve was the absolute best relationship for Fiona. Me, I honestly think I'm literally split 50-50 or maybe 60-40, 80-20. I don't know. There's part of me that does agree that Jimmy Steve was Fiona's best relationship and I really shipped them a lot. But there's another big part of me that thinks they were just really toxic and needed to end. So first, let's talk about the side of me that really loved them together. Out of this entire list of Fiona's love interests, I think he was the one who genuinely cared about her and loved her the most. He wanted her to have a good life. He wanted to help her siblings, and he wanted to destroy Frank, as he should. In the second episode of season 1, Jimmy witnesses Frank physically abuse Ian, and after seeing this, Jimmy sends Frank away to Canada.
How the hell did I end up in Canada? Hey. I hate fucking Canada.
And after finding this out, Fiona gets super mad. She clocks him across the face. She's like, stay out of my family's business. My dad has nothing to do with you, da-da-da. And I understand that. I do. But at the same time, shipping Frank to Canada was kind of a king move. The fact that he was so concerned about her family's safety that he was willing to do that. And the funny thing is, if he would have done something like that in the later seasons, Fiona would not have cared at all, because Frank just gets even more trash. Or honestly, it's not even that he gets more trash, he just doesn't change. So as the seasons go on, the kids start to give less and less of a frick about him, and there are instances where they throw him in dumpsters, they throw him in the river, and they just don't care whether he lives or dies. So at the end of the day, Jimmy Steve was always right. He knew from very early on that Frank needed to be disposed of, and instead of punching him, Fiona should have been saying thank you. Also, can we please talk about Thanksgiving? So we all know the very tragic event that happened on Thanksgiving in season 2. This is when Monica attempted to take her own life, and immediately the way Jimmy Steve got in there and pulled together the situation was, I don't even know. I don't have the words to describe it, because Frank literally just left the house and Jimmy Steve immediately got in, like tried to help Monica.
Towel! Somebody give me a fucking towel! Kid, get over here!
And quite literally saved Monica's life. Even afterwards, the way he stayed and helped Fiona like clean up the blood, held her hand through the entire thing. It was just so sweet. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I would have folded. I would have fell in love. Among all of this, Jimmy Steve also lets Lip stay at his place when Fiona kicks him out. He helps take care of Liam. He brings all the kids food and coffee and cooks for them. And even though he would often have a lot of trouble with Fiona's relationship and responsibility to the kids, I do really think he genuinely cared about all of them. And I don't think any other man on this list under Fiona would have taken the actions that Jimmy Steve took to care for her family. But remember, there is that side of me that thinks they were also super toxic, so let's get into that. First off, I mean, he was a literal fraud, lied to her about his identity from the start, and that's never a good way to start a relationship. That's not a good foundation for something that is healthy. Also, as I mentioned, even though I think he did care a lot about Fiona's siblings and all the kids, I do think there was a part of him that was kind of selfish, because he was always talking to her about like how she should be living her life and how she shouldn't be so tied down to raising her siblings. And I do think a lot of that comes out of genuine care for Fiona and her well-being and the way she lives her life in her prime. But I do also think there was a part of him that just wanted Fiona all to himself with no extra baggage. And not that that's inherently a bad thing to want with someone you're in a relationship with, but at the same time, he knew exactly what he was getting into when he started dating her. So I think at a certain point, he just needed to accept the fact that she was basically these kids' mother. And I don't think that was something he was willing to really accept in the long run, especially with his lifestyle and the way he chose to make money, which was by criminal activity, which is another reason why they were so toxic, because that was the last thing Fiona needs in a relationship. She already comes from so much chaos, and you know, as understandable as it is that she's attracted to criminal type guys, that's never gonna work for her. That's always gonna crash and burn. And I think Jimmy's conning, fraudster kind of behavior reminded her a lot of Frank. And it is a psychological thing where women are attracted to men that kind of have the same qualities as their father. So that's just something that I kind of think about when I look at them together. I'm like, Jimmy kind of gives Frank sometimes. Also, a really big reason why I thought this relationship could just never work in the long run was just the basic lifestyle differences. Fiona comes from poverty and Jimmy comes from wealth. Not that this is something that can never work out, but I just think in this relationship, it caused way too much toxicity. Over here, this is a picture of Jimmy and his father after he finds out that he is gay and is also sleeping with Ian.
Whoa, Dad, where's your clothes?
I was gonna take a shower and I came into the wrong room.
Yeah, then you hopped up in my bed with a full chub.
Obviously, this is a lot to take in, and there were several times where Jimmy would try to talk to Fiona about it, but she would always dismiss him. And there were just several instances where she never thought his problems were good enough enough to talk about because they were just rich people problems.
Yeah, why don't you go cry to your gay dad about it?
Oh, that's not. I honestly hated Fiona in this scene. She was so mean to him. And then later on after this, Jimmy tells Fiona that he's been cooking, cleaning, taking care of the Gallaghers, and he says that he's been living in a slum.
What have I been doing? Cooking, cleaning, laundry, living in a goddamn slum.
Yikes. And then my very last reason on Jimmy's part was I just thought that he was super manipulative. There is a storyline in season 5 where he comes back after being gone for a while and he wants to get back together with Fiona, even though Fiona is married to this guy right here named Gus. Jimmy knows very well that Fiona is married, but he wants to get back together. He wants to sleep with her. And there is a scene where he's like sweet talking her. He's like, I love you. I've missed you. I know you miss me too. He's touching her hair, touching her neck. And it just makes me so uncomfortable because you can tell that Fiona really doesn't want to. And I'm not saying that this is all Jimmy's fault. Like Jimmy's the bad guy and Fiona's like a victim. You know, Fiona's at fault too. She did actively turn around and kiss him and sleep with him, but it wasn't giving true love. And I feel like if you really love someone, then you wouldn't make them cheat on their current partner. So I don't know. I hated this. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't like them together, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Jimmy and Fiona were the ultimate shameless relationship? I mean, besides Mickey and Ian, of course. What do you guys think about these two? Next, let's move on to Mike and Robbie. In season 3, Fiona gets a new corporate job, her first office job ever, and this guy Mike is Fiona's boss. They like each other and they start dating, and through this, Fiona develops a really nice relationship with his family. She's always getting invited to games and dinners, and if that was me in this situation, I would have been all on top of it. Family dinners, free food, count me in. Good looking, stable income, count me in. But we get introduced to Robbie, Mike's brother, and he seems to have a completely different outlook on life. He does not believe in sitting at a desk and updating spreadsheets all day like Mike does. He's an addict, he has no job, and just has a more free-spirited outlook. So naturally, Fiona is more drawn to him, and she sleeps with him and has an affair behind Mike's back. So we already kind of saw this pattern with Jimmy Steve when Fiona thought that he was just a boring rich guy and she was about to walk out on the date with him. Yeah, this is kind of the same situation with Mike. He was kind of just your standard office guy. Fiona, in that situation, when presented with a more chaotic option, she's going to go with that one because that's all she knows. She is the product of two parents who are dysfunctional, selfish, and have no regard for consequences. So, of course, Fiona subconsciously seeks out relationships that replicate this kind of dynamic. Also, as Mr. Anderson from The Perks of Being a Wallflower once said, we accept the love we think we deserve. And I kind of think Fiona and Robbie is a perfect example of this. And there's even a scene after Mike finds out about Fiona and Robbie's affair. They're talking, and Fiona tells Mike, I didn't think I deserved you, and in the end, it turns out I was right. Fiona didn't grow up with a shining example of two loving, stable parents, so therefore she didn't think she deserved those types of qualities in her own relationship either. Fiona's next couple of relationships really highlight the fact that sometimes people just don't change. Fiona's affair with Robbie literally landed her baby brother in the hospital and her in jail. But you know what she does the very next season? She cheats again on a guy she is married to. And then immediately after she divorces said guy, she starts a relationship with this guy here named Sean, who is not only her boss, but he's also a recovering drug addict. So after dating your boss the first time and then cheating on him with a drug addict, you want to do that again with Sean? Oh, so yeah, this is insane, and honestly, a major lesson that I learned from watching Shameless is that change is truly hard. You can literally hit your rock bottom and still fall back into the same habits that you should have learned from. And then Fiona was surprised at the wedding when Frank revealed that Sean had relapsed. Like, girl, what did you expect? And I'm not saying that drug addicts can't recover, because they definitely can. But in Fiona's case, it's like, we've already seen this film before. Why are you hitting rewind? Now let's get into Lip. I truly have never seen a relationship quite like Karen and Lip in any other show I have watched in my entire life. And when I would watch these two on screen, I would often ask myself, what the flip does Lip see in Karen? At the beginning of the show, Karen was actually relatively nice, but as the show went on, she just got incredibly mean, almost to a sociopathic level. She slept with his father, first off, assaulting him in the process because Frank was on heavy drugs and could not consent to what he was doing. She slept around. If I were him, I would have been like, okay, you do that, you sleep around, I'm going to go pursue someone else. But no, he claimed that he was just in love with her. On top of that, she ends up having a baby who has Down syndrome, and she would often call this baby the R slur. She would threaten to sell the baby or leave it out by the dumpster. She was mean to Sheila, and at one point during this whole situation, Lip tells Jody, you dodged an RPG getting rid of this one.
You dodged a fucking RPG getting tossed over by this one.
And I'm just like, Lip, stop acting like you hate Karen, because we all know you still like her. Because after she runs away and comes back, Lip is with Mandy. When she comes back, Lip sleeps with her and considers leaving Mandy for her. So I am just like, what the frick is it about Karen that Lip is so attracted to? And I think it just all boils down to the chase. Lip liked and enjoyed the thrill of chasing Karen, someone who was so emotionally unavailable. He got excitement from it. Also, Karen did not care about Lip enough to try to give him advice or tell him what to do. Throughout the show, Lip's pride got in the way of so many opportunities, and there was truly nothing he seemed to hate more than when Fiona, Kevin V, Mandy, or other people in his life tried to tell him about how much potential he had and how much he was the most likely to leave the South Side, get a great job, and be successful. He hated that. So with Karen, she was the perfect person that he could be with and not have to worry about any of that because she didn't care enough to do that. Whereas Mandy was the complete opposite. Mandy was a girl who was super vulnerable. She had so much family trauma with her father. She was abused sexually and physically by him and by many other men in her life. So she really needed and craved a pure, loving relationship. But that was way too much for Lip. Mandy was too available for him. She was constantly waiting for him with open arms.
I'm good to stay.
No, please just go home, Mandy. To your own fucking house for once.
Where Karen was completely closed off and only gave him the time of day when it was on her terms. Mandy also constantly wanted Lip to tap into his full potential. She urged him often to apply to colleges, and I think this really frightened Lip, so he never could fully give himself to Mandy, which is really sad because she deserved love. And even down to her last appearance on the show, she was never able to achieve that. This pattern of Lip liking the chase of unavailable women happens again in his next two relationships. Once Lip goes to college, he has a roommate that has a girlfriend, and this girlfriend is this girl Amanda. So since Amanda is taken, she's dating Lip's roommate. Of course, Lip likes her. So eventually they start dating, and it turns out that Amanda's parents come from a good amount of money, and they actually have connections to be able to get Lip some pretty good opportunities. So now Lip has this stable and pretty nice relationship with Amanda. He has gotten an internship from her father, and she really likes him. So as soon as Lip gets the girl, as soon as he is presented with an opportunity where he has to face up to his potential, as soon as the girl opens up too much and falls too hard for him, he no longer likes her.
The fuck was that for?
Making me fall in love with you?
So now he has to go chase an unavailable woman, which is this woman right here named Helene. Helene is not only an unavailable married woman, but she is also his professor. This catapults into so much more toxicity for him. This is around the time where his life just starts to plummet to rock bottom. He struggles a lot with alcoholism and eventually gets expelled from school. So at this point, he has lost everything, all because he couldn't handle the thought of a stable life and a successful future with Amanda. So after Lip hits rock bottom, Fiona gets him a job at Patsy's, which is a place where she started working after she hit her rock bottom at the end of season 4. At Patsy's, Lip meets this girl right here named Sierra. And I am really excited to talk about her because, unpopular opinion, but she's actually my favorite love interest for Lip. So let's get into it. Sierra is a new waitress at Patsy's, and you know, her and Lip are both two hot employees, so naturally they have an attraction to each other and they start sleeping together. At first, the relationship is just casual, but Sierra actually has a really interesting backstory of her own. When she was younger, her father killed her mother. Sierra also has a son named Lucas and a baby daddy named Charlie. Charlie is also a drunk like Lip, and he's just an awful father, but Charlie is always around apologizing to Sierra, telling her he's gonna get sober, he's gonna be a better father, and Lip is like, no, you're bad for Sierra, you need to stay away from her. But Lip is also an alcoholic too, so Charlie is like, oh, you're no better for her, and they clash. They do not get along. They beef really hard. They get into a huge fight outside of Patsy's, and there's even one instance where Sierra is considering getting back together with Charlie, so Lip sabotages Charlie by planting coke in like a pizza box that he orders so he can be tempted and do the coke. And it's just like, what? Like, this is so crazy. So after hearing about all of this mess, y'all are probably like, why is Sierra your favorite love interest for Lip? This sounds really toxic. But just hear me out, okay? It seemed like she was literally the first guy that he genuinely cared about himself, because as I explained with Lip's previous love interest, he doesn't do well with girls who fall for him too hard, girls who open their heart up to him too much. But Sierra, she was always constantly opening up to him. They were constantly opening themselves up to each other, and I just felt like that was the first time we ever kind of got that dynamic with a love interest for Lip. And he was always looking out for her and trying to protect her. Even though his little rivalry with Charlie was super toxic and could be immature, I just feel like Lip would never care enough to have like a rivalry with another man over Mandy or Amanda. I just felt that there was more feelings from him towards Sierra, and it was nice to watch. And there's even a time where Sierra's dad gets released from jail, so she's super scared, she's super upset. So Lip tracks her father down and initiates a fight with him so that he can go back to jail on battery charges. And it's just like, oh, he actually really likes her. Sierra was there for Lip when Monica dies. She goes to the funeral with him. They tell each other they love each other. And throughout this, I was just like, it's kind of cute. It's kind of cute. And even though I really wanted them to work out, I do think Lip's reason for ending things made a lot of sense. Ultimately, Lip breaks up with Sierra because he didn't feel like he was in the headspace to give her the proper love. She had so much of her own trauma she needed to heal from, and with Lip still struggling with alcoholism, he didn't feel like he could be the best person that she needed him to be. All his life, he's been surrounded by drugs and alcohol, and he felt like he didn't know who he was or really what he wanted. This breakup scene was just so sad because you could tell that Lip was like a safe space for her, and she was devastated when he broke up with her. But like I said, I do think it was necessary. And lastly for Lip, we have Tammy. Tammy and Lip meet at a wedding. Tammy's sister is marrying Lip's sponsor, so they meet at that wedding, and they're the couple who has the slutty wedding sex. It's always got to be one couple. So after that, they continue to have a casual relationship. However, fast forward, Tammy ends up pregnant. I think Lip liked Tammy a lot in the beginning of the relationship because, again, it was a challenge, it was a chase. She was a little mean. She would often make fun of the way Lip has sex, and she would call him quote unquote jabby.
Yeah, see you later, Jabby.
So Lip, you know, he has the history with the mean girls, and I think he liked that aspect of it. But later on into the relationship, after they have their baby, we learn that stability and order was a very important thing to Tammy. She wanted to move out and away from Chicago to start a stable life with Lip and their son Fred, but Lip wanted to stay close to all of his family and the chaos.
You love your fucked up family more than you're ever gonna love me.
But he couldn't just walk away and go chasing after another girl like he usually does, because this time he's locked in, like they have a kid together. Unlike some of Lip's other love interests, like Amanda or Mandy, she was not compelled under the Lip Gallagher spell, and she stood her ground on matters that were important to her. All in all, though, I genuinely think that she and Lip have no chemistry. I sincerely do not think they will last very long. I can't remember if they were together or apart at the end of the series, but I definitely see a future of them co-parenting in different households. Now let's move on to Ian. So obviously Ian's biggest and most important love interest in the show is our guy Mickey, but I felt like it's important to mention these these two men who were twice, three times Ian's age, who he had relationships with. So in season 1, Ian had a relationship with this guy Cash, who was his boss at the convenience store he worked at, and then there was Ned, who I mentioned earlier, Jimmy's dad. I think the show did its intended job of portraying how unfortunately common it is for queer youth, especially ones who grow up in poverty and that kind of environment, to have relationships with older men. And this dynamic reminds me a lot of the book/movie Mysterious Skin. If you haven't seen it, I actually don't recommend it. It's so heart-wrenching, but I've read the book and I watched the movie. It's about two boys who were abused when they were younger, and once the two boys grow up, they end up having two separate responses to the trauma. One of the boys, Neil, is gay, and he grows up having a lot of relationships with older men because he thinks it's sort of a rite of passage into the gay community. And in my research, I found out that it's actually very common for young queer boys, especially ones who grow up in poverty, to have relationships with older men and be groomed like that. So it's truly sickening, but it's important to acknowledge. Let's get into Ian's most prominent love interest, Mickey Milkovich. Mickey's sister, Mandy, used to have a crush on Ian, and after she tried to put the moves on him, she rejected him and went running to Mickey, claiming that Ian had assaulted her. So Mickey starts to terrorize Ian as revenge, but deep down, there must have been some feelings. There must have been a little crush, because these two get into a fight, right? And Mickey doesn't skip a beat to start undressing and hooking up with Ian. Mickey and Ian go through a long treacherous journey throughout the show. They struggle with sexuality, family, other relationships, crime, mental illness, violence, and so much more. There is a tiny percent of the fandom that thinks Mickey and Ian were toxic, and even some of the Gallaghers thought they were toxic. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Fiona, it didn't seem like she shipped Mickey and Ian too much. But the fact that they were able to overcome all of the challenges I just mentioned and still end up one of the only couples on the show to have a successful marriage, I think this is the very reason that they are the best couple in the entire show. Fiona could never and would never overcome that much with any of her love interests. Lip could never and would never. One of the big setbacks with the Gallavich relationship was crime. I believe that Mickey and Ian were separated a total of 5 times due to one of them going to jail. Number 1 happened in season 1 after Mickey gets arrested for the thefts at the convenience store. Number 2 happens in season 2 when Mickey intentionally punches a cop to avoid his father finding out about him being gay. Number 3 happens in season 5 when Ian goes to jail after Sammy reports him to MPs. Number 4 happens also in season 5 when Mickey gets arrested for attempted murder on Sammy. And number 5 happens in season 7 after Mickey escapes prison. He flees to Mexico and eventually ends up in jail once again. Honestly, guys, I don't know how long I could hold on if the love of my life just kept going to jail like that. At a certain point, I would be like, okay, it's over. So it really shows how much Mickey really stays and sticks to the back of Ian's mind.
Can't get him out of my head.
Because Ian does try several times throughout season 6 and 7 to move on from Mickey, but when Mickey breaks out of jail and reunites with Ian, even though Ian has another boyfriend at this time, it's very hard for Ian to even stay away from Mickey for 1 second. The part where Mickey says he thought about Ian every day in jail just pulls at my heartstrings. As we all know, one of Mickey's biggest struggles was his father, who was a raging homophobe. Hello, welcome back, I'm in another outfit. But anyways, the fact that Mickey and Ian were able to survive the hatred of Terry Milkovich is still crazy to me. With what he made Mickey do with Svetlana, the wedding, Yevgeny, it was just like so much was going on. And then we also have the mental health aspect. Ian gets diagnosed bipolar and goes through a lot of difficulties. Mickey tries his hardest to take care of Ian by himself, but after Ian steals Yevgeny and has a pretty big manic episode, he goes to get professional help, and they had to overcome overcome this whole idea with Ian thinking that Mickey wanted to like fix him and change him. I feel like all of these things culminated together would cause any relationship to crash and burn. No matter what they went through, they always wind up finding their ways back to each other. And I feel like there was just truly nothing that their relationship could not withstand. And you can't really say that for any other couple on this board except for maybe Kevin V. I also love the Ian fell first but Mickey fell harder type of dynamic. In the beginning, Ian was definitely the more sensitive and affectionate one.
Take your hand off the glass.
But by the end, Mickey was the one always verbalizing how much he loved Ian. In front of the Gallaghers, in front of the whole city, even in front of his father, who was the very person that Mickey was the most afraid of in the beginning. As a Milkovich, all he grew up around was hate and violence. So when he started getting close to Ian, someone who also had a rough background but was a little bit more sensitive, I think this made Mickey realize, wait, it's actually okay to be loving and affectionate. Okay, now let's get into Kev and V. I didn't talk about them that much in my previous Shameless videos, so I definitely wanted to dive into them today as they were pretty much the most stable couple on the entire show. I'm pretty sure they only went through one major breakup in all 11 seasons, and this was in season 5 after V had given birth to their twins. This storyline used to annoy me so much when I first watched the show because I used to think, why is V being so mean to Kev about these babies? She wanted these kids so bad to the point where she even had Kev screw her own mother. So now she has these kids and she doesn't want them. That's what I used to think when I first started watching the show. But I think maturing is realizing that this was a very valid issue. And I can definitely see how having children can change the entire trajectory of a relationship. Once you add children into the mix, it's never going to be the same as when you were just a couple.
We were a couple, then we had kids and you became a family with them.
Also, new mothers need to be catered to as much as the new babies. She just got done pushing out twins and it did seem like Kev would give like a lot more attention to the babies than her, even though like obviously they need a lot of attention. But as I get older, I just try to see more of V's side of the argument and like try to put myself in her shoes. Most of the fandom agrees that Kev and V are the most stable couple, but I see a small percentage saying that they were super toxic because Kev was married at the beginning of their relationship, or because of the whole addition of Svetlana and V getting married to her behind Kev's back. But you know, it is Shameless at the end of the day. Every single relationship is going to have their crazy quirks, but a few things that make Kev and V the most stable relationship is they had communication, they had commitment and unwavering love. And I love the fact that they were never like legally married, at least I don't think they were, but even so, they were one of the most enjoyable depictions of a husband and wife that I've watched in a TV show. Okay, now let's end everything off and bring everything full circle and let's discuss Frank and Monica. This one is definitely twisted, and it really shows how much drugs mixed with untreated mental issues not only affects a relationship itself, but also generations of relationships, as we could see through their children. I often see fans ask the question, did Frank and Monica truly love each other? And my answer to that is honestly no. In my opinion, true love should not look the way that Frank and Monica looked. They did not exhibit true love to me. Sure, maybe Monica was the most special to Frank, and he had the biggest, most long-term attachment to her because they had hella kids together, and also because they share the same narcissistic mindset. They both loved themselves more than anybody else, and I feel like they were attached to each other through that same mindset.
You deserve each other.
Even though there were instances where they fought for each other and they always came back to each other throughout the show, there was never any encouragement from either side to get better. They thrived off of and liked each other best when they were both at their worst, when they could both be reckless and not think about the consequences of anything. And I don't know, maybe they both did truly love each other, but both of their selfish natures outshined the love. Maybe love just wasn't enough for them. I found it really interesting how intelligent Frank was. He was very smart, and we saw that through through his scamming and his conning. And I believe he and Monica met in college, and then Monica was the one who introduced him to drugs and this lifestyle of chaos and mental instability. I think out of all the Shameless spin-off ideas, what we need the most is a prequel of Frank and Monica. How Frank was pre-Monica, the story of how they met, their downfall, and how their relationship was when it was just Fiona and they hadn't had any of their other kids yet. I am dying to see that. Who do I need to talk to make it happen? Alrighty, that was my analysis of each major Shameless relationship. There are so many more ideas and, routes to explore. So definitely let me know if you guys have any other thoughts or comments on these relationships. Which one was your favorite? Which one was the worst in your opinion? And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.